Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm just supposed to start. Is there anybody else who's supposed to make some introductory remarks? Um, okay, I guess not. Okay, so I'm going to begin. Um, my name is Norm Blumenthal. I'm the Zachter Family Director of Trauma and Bereavement Services for OHEL. Unfortunately, we have to have this meeting. We're doing this in conjunction with Sephardic Beit Holim. And I do want to recognize, I see Rochelle Mansour is on, who's really one of the original people starting this and starting Sephardic Beit Holim. And I thought I saw Lauren Hakim, but maybe she left and is coming back. But I want to thank them for the partnership and which we're actually nurturing at this time and the relationship we have with them. On behalf of OHEL and our CEO, David Mendel, and our Presidium of Mel Zachter and Jay Kestenbaum, I want to extend my condolences to the Fax family and to the entire Deal community on this very tragic loss. I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about how we can respond, how can we process this with our children, and how we can help the Fax family as much as possible. This is being recorded, so if somebody misses my part, they certainly can get the recording. Many of you may have questions, and you can address them in many different ways. We can wait till I'm finished and either raise your hand and ask them, or at any point during this meeting, you can use the chat to ask a question. You can ask if you don't mind that people know that you're asking it. You can direct it to the entire group. If you'd rather it was private, you can you can ask the question directly to me, and I will ask the question anonymously if there's an issue that's of concern to you that you don't want to ask, but you'd like to be in touch with me. I will try to remember to make my contact information available, or any of the SBH staff has a way of reaching me. But also, if there is such an issue, then just place in the chat with either number or an email address, and I'll get in touch with you after this presentation. So let's talk about, in terms of coping with a tragedy of this magnitude. And let's start with what's fairly obvious, and probably all of you have heard many, many times from me and other speakers. First, address yourself before you address your children. We always, mobilize the famous metaphor of on the airlines and the safety instructions when they tell you to put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your child. Here too, make sure that you have somehow processed this, that you contain it, and then you can discuss with your children. That doesn't mean you can't be sad, and doesn't mean you can even cry. This is something worth crying over, but it shouldn't be something where you feel you're out of control, because even if you say everything right, our children will sense that and will be also out of control, even if we say all the right words. So again, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is coping with about it yourself. And keep in mind as well that those who are closest to this tragedy are going to feel it most profoundly. So anyone who are close friends with the Faxes, our relatives, Faxes, our neighbors of the Faxes, will probably feel this more profoundly. Sometimes the closeness could be defined by life circumstances. Those of you who have children around the same age, those of you whom there may have been a mishap like this that occurred within your family, within yours, and then another circle of friends, and therefore it's going to trigger you and bring you back to that. You're going to feel it more profoundly, and your children will feel it more profoundly. Also, we all have different levels of expressivity, emotional expressivity. Some people by nature are more emotional, and other people by nature may be more stoic and unemotional. And that's going to have some bearing. It doesn't make one better than the other. It's just the differences that exist between us. And some people have a stronger tendency towards empathy, towards connecting to other people, and some people have less. Again, there's not a benefit or a disadvantage. It's just the normal differences. And again, those who have sort of more natural tendency to empathize, or those who more naturally place themselves in the place of the family, of the parents and the siblings, will obviously feel it more profoundly. When it comes to yourself or your children, first thing you do is you don't try to talk people out of scary feelings or sad feelings, you validate them. And if a child expresses to you an amount of sadness, or you yourself are feeling sadness, or if your spouse expresses to you a fear that God forbid something like that could happen to you, or if a child expresses a fear that something like that could, God forbid, happen to them, we don't try to talk them out of it. We validate the legitimacy of those fears and that everybody feels that way. We can assure our children and ourselves that something like this is rare, and that certainly swimming, with all the precautions that we routinely exercise, is a good exercise and is recreational activity. And we should try to prevent both ourselves and our children from having a fear of the water or fear of swimming. But again, and we'll talk later about fault. We'll talk about that if the important topic. But to assure them that this is something rare, this does not happen often, and that swimming and water recreation is something that we can appreciate and do in a safe manner. It's very important, and this again is something I'm going to get back to again later, about to your children, that nobody did anything intentionally. There's no bad guys. Again, unfortunately, we live in a time where there's a lot of danger, where we are, especially as Jews, feeling in our lifetimes an unprecedented sense of threat. So it really very important, I guess, to ourselves, but particularly to our children, that this does not fall in that category. This is not October 7th. There wasn't an evil, wicked person who did harm to Yosef Zichrono Livracha. And again, children may, especially younger children, may think that way, and that's something we'd have to clarify for them. Explain to them the sadness that everybody feels and the family feels, but at the same time, integrate it with an awareness that Yosef is in Gan Eden, Yosef is okay. These concepts, the concepts of an afterlife, the concepts of a soul, the concepts of the resurrection of the dead, in other words, the Neshama, Gan Eden, and Tchiat HaMeitim, are concepts that help people with grief. This is based on psychological research, that those who have this kind of belief system fare better with grief. We brought these concepts to the world, so it's something we're comfortable with. So you can reference that and you can tell that to the children, but don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, it looks like you're trying to deny them their legitimate grief. So, but reference it and let them know Yosef can. Let them know that the sadness that his family feels, that his friends feel, that the community at large feels, is because they miss him and because of the pain of the absence. But it's not because he is now somehow in pain, and certainly make it clear, especially very young children, he's not stuck in the ground or anything like that, that he's himself is in a very good place. Children very often in a situation like this, particularly elementary school age children and particularly boys, sometimes get very caught up in the facts. They want to know exactly what happened, and many of us may not know. To the extent that it is universally known, you can share some facts, but again, in a very clear way, emphasizing how this is not because anybody did anything wrong, that this was just one of these mishaps that happen on rare occasions, but you can fill it in. It's very natural for children this age to look for factual explanations. So they're really doing what is natural for them, particularly, as I said, elementary school age boys. And if we don't know, we can tell them that we don't know. But don't be angry at them that instead of dealing with the emotions, that they're very preoccupied with the facts. That's just very natural for children this age. Children under the age, I'm not going to say 5 to 6, we used to say 6, now we're starting to see children are developing faster, but children under the age of 5 to 6 really don't understand death. Meaning specifically, they don't understand the permanence, they don't understand the deterioration of the body. And very often, children that age don't look upset, aren't grieving or aren't distressed. And again, that's not because they're heartless and not because there's something wrong with them, but they just don't get it. Adults do these disappearing acts from time to time, and children do also. They have friends from the summer, then they have friends in the winter, and somebody moves away. And that's what they think this death thing is. So sometimes they'll have a very sort of casual kind of, inconsequential type of response. It's again not because there's anything wrong with them, it's merely because of their age. Now, at some point, they may sense that something very big happened, and they may have a fear response because they'll sort of more intuitively sense that something frightening happened. And very often for children this age, rather than explanations, what's usually useful is just maintaining their routine, giving them hugs, like I say, just see, okay, giving them the hugs and giving them the affection and preserving their routine, because their routine is their security. Also, be very aware when you're speaking to very young children that more important than the words you use is your voice tone, is the manner in which you speak. And if you want to assure them of their safety, say it with certainty, say it with a certain confidence. Again, certainly if you're talking about the loss and the pain for your friends, and you can be sad and you can demonstrate sadness, as I mentioned earlier. It's okay to cry in front of children in circumstances like this. But at the same time, if you're trying to assure them of their safety, they'll listen more to your voice tone and then to your body language than to the actual words you use. Children under the age, I'm going to say 12, or like children before adolescence, generally aren't trying to deal with what we call in Hebrew tzadik v'alo v'shrasha v'tovlo, or why bad things happen to good people. This is more of an adolescent thing. And adolescents who are going to hear about this and are going to ponder why good people have to suffer like this, or why a little child like this had to go through something of this sort. And of course, as we all know, that's the unanswerable question. And very often the best thing to do is not to try to answer it, but to explain to them that these are things that even very wise people ponder. So we have a tradition that Moshe asked Hashem that question. Hashem said he can't answer it. And by definition, Hashem has to be mysterious. If we could understand Hashem, he wouldn't be Hashem. They often quote the Kotzker Rebbe, who used to say, I could never believe in a God I could understand. So, but that issue is going to come up probably more with teenagers than with elementary school age children. Elementary school age children are not trying to figure out Hashem. Now I get a chance to welcome Rochelle Mansour, who is certainly the founder and very important member and long-standing friend. And I'm honored that she's participating. That sometimes they'll hear shocking news and they'll sort of shut down, and wait a second, I'm just getting a message. My internet is unstable. I hope everybody hears me. If not, please, unmute yourself and tell me if for some reason I'm freezing or something. We're having construction done in my house and some unpredictable things happen. Very often what they'll do is when they hear shocking news is they'll shut down. They'll disappear. They'll say, okay, can I go play? Or, all right, can I now ride my bike or something? And again, you might think your child is callous. Kids have a very good capacity to sometimes when they hear shocking news, just shut down and then let it seep in. And the only thing you really have to say to them is that's fine. But if you have any questions, anything you want to talk about, please feel free to come back and address it with me. And, very often they will, I always say jokingly, usually at the most inconvenient time imaginable, but they will come back and they'll ask questions, or they'll share their concerns. It's probably, especially if you have a connection with the family, you may want to bring the children for a Shiva visit. And this is a teachable moment. It's it's a time to teach them about Shiva and what Shiva is about. Teach them the tradition of Saint Menachem Mishkan Hashemayim when you leave, but also how this is a very big mitzvah of Nichum Avelim. And again, they don't have to do anything dramatic. They can sit and they can listen. However, please keep in mind that Shiva, the point of Shiva, is to talk about the deceased. It's a little challenging when it's an 18-month-old, but 18-month-olds have personality. 18-month-olds are named after people. And it could be very comforting, again. But as I often tell people, when someone dies, the relationship doesn't end. It changes. It changes from a face-to-face relationship to a relationship with memories, and the Shiva launches that. So it gets it in motion. So if making sure is please don't talk about the weather, please don't talk about the news. Really try to focus on the child and on the loss. And again, it can be a teachable moment for the children. One important point when it comes to Shiva and it comes to your children, it comes to you as well. Don't try to feign more friendship than actually exists. We're kind-hearted people. We feel very bad for the family, and sometimes might be someone we may be just very casual friends of the Faxes, and but now you feel bad, so you're going to come and you're going to sit there a long time, or you're going to suddenly try to be friendly with them. People who are suffering have a very astute sense of what's real and what's not real. So if they are very close friends, for sure, go pay a Shiva visit, sit in the front, maybe pay more than one Shiva visit, bring food, do something. If you're a more casual friend, then maybe just come once and sit one row behind. If you're just a neighbor and you're not that close, do come and do visit, but don't stay as long, and don't sit in the front staring at them. I hear this from people who are grieving, and they find this very, very difficult. The other thing that's extremely important, if we're going to be talking about the family, and first of all, treat them normally and tell your children to treat them normally. Don't run away from them if you see them in Shabbat, whatever your relationship was before. If it's just somebody who you said Shabbat Shalom to, if you saw them, then say Shabbat Shalom to them. If it's someone you walk home with from Beit Knesset, so you walk home with them. Don't treat them as if they have a communicable disease. Be like you were before. If they want to talk about Yosef, then listen and let them talk. If they don't try to pressure them. Treat them normally. And also, please don't pity. People have a very hard time with pity. Pity is usually, oh, I'm so much better off than you are. You're down here. Puppy eyes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Extend your concern. Tell them how much you care about them. Tell them how much you would love to help them. But say it with dignity. Say it as an equal. There, we have no reason to assume that we're any better or any worse than they are. And people find pity insulting, but find more genuine sympathy and care both comforting and helpful. Now, I alluded to this before, but I want to mention this. This is a very difficult topic. Many of us, and I include myself, would love to know exactly what happened, because we want to assure ourselves that this couldn't happen to us. And therefore, we get very curious exactly what happened. And maybe sometimes people might even start asking the family exactly the circumstance. And I don't know the circumstances. There are different things, but I don't know the exact circumstances. But I don't think I want to know. But this can be very hurtful. This can be very painful. First of all, I'm sure the family, even though I'm sure it's not legitimate, are probably racked with guilt. And that's usually the case. And all of the cases like this that I've dealt with over the last 30 years that I'm doing trauma bereavement work, there has never been any kind of gross negligence or anything like that. Usually it's just one of those strange circumstances where something like this happens, but nobody's really well, but they very naturally, especially with the loss of a child, will feel guilty. So please don't try to explain and try to find out exactly what happened. And I want to tell you one more thing, and I'm going out on a limb a little bit, but I think that's important. Who among us who have been raising children or have raised children, haven't had those situations occur that were dangerous, even though we're all excellent parents and we're all very careful with our children? But who hasn't had a child who, the moment you turn away, runs into a busy street, or you just about grab them before they run in? Or who hasn't had a situation of a child getting lost for a while in a mall, in an amusement park? Or who of us haven't accidentally given a child who's allergic to nuts and a food item that we didn't know had nuts in it, and we had to give them shots or call Hatzalah? These things happen with the best of parents. So as hard as it may be, we have to look at this as one of those kind of life circumstances that occur on rare occasions, just like cancer does and just like vehicular accidents do. And it's not anybody's fault, and there's nothing to really be gained by trying to scrutinize and find what happens, certainly not with the family, because they will read that as if you're pointing an accusatory finger. And maybe we're going to do that just so we can delude ourselves that none of us are immune. And it really is a form of deluding ourselves. So please be very careful with that. Another thing that's very important to understand with, again, Lorena, the loss of a young child, is that when, let's say, an elderly person dies, we mourn the past. We mourn the life they had. When a young person dies, we mourn the future. We mourn the life that we dreamt for them, the life we had anticipated for them. And for people who lose a child like Yosef at that age, the fact that their last memory of their child is at such a young age, and his contemporaries, his cousins, are growing and reaching new milestones, is very painful. It's one of the hardest parts of grieving a child. And it's going to happen. If you have children of comparable age, your child's going to reach that milestone, starting school, starting first grade, going to first time away to sleepaway camp, going bar mitzvah, all adolescents, and every one of them is really a knife in the heart for those who have lost very young children. Now, you might want to say then, okay, I'm not going to tell them anything about my child who's about the same age, or the cousin who's about the same age. They're going to see through that also. You can share, you can talk, you can invite them to participate in celebratory occasions that commemorate a milestone, but don't overdo it. Don't highlight it too much, because understand that that is so difficult. The other thing, by the way, is that one of the nightmares for parents who lose children is that the child will be forgotten. Again, an older person leaves a legacy, probably leaves descendants. A young child doesn't. And the parents dread, and I've heard this many times in many different versions of this, that the child will be forgotten. One of the most comforting things that you can do for the facts is not now when it's in everybody's mind, but a year from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Let them know some way or another that you still remember Yosef. Let them know that Yosef is still someone that you think about. It could be a simple memory. I remember how much he loved playing with this and this toy. I mean, something as innocuous as that, but the very fact that even now, years later, you're still thinking about Yosef, and you realize that there's a void in their lives, is very validating and can be very comforting. So please try to keep that in mind, especially for those of you who are close to the family, who are relatives of the family. One more thing, don't try to make them happy. Don't try to remove their sadness. Their sadness is not only very legitimate in a way that's too complicated to go into now, their sadness is part of achieving the Nechama. This is a normal sadness. The pain that they're going through, the crying that they're doing, is not because they're depressed. It's because they had a real painful event occur to them, and it's very natural, it's even healthy for them to be sad. And if you try to say something to them or tell them something to remove their sadness, it's denying the enormity of their loss and the enormity of the relationship and the connection that we feel to our children. It's far more useful to validate their pain, to acknowledge their pain. I've heard from many people who've lost children in these kind of very sudden tragic circumstances that sometimes the most comforting visit are the people who just cry with them. I remember one person who lost a young child told me that his chavruta from yeshiva drove from Baltimore to New York 4 hours to visit him, walked into the yeshiva house, sat down, cried 10 minutes up, and he was Ashkenazi, so he said the Hamakom, and left. He said he drove 8 hours for 10-minute cry, and how that was the most comforting visit. And crying is, don't try to shush them if they're crying. Crying is not healthy. They once compared tears. They compared the tears of those who are crying from pain with those who cut onions or something like that and start crying. And they're different tears. The tears cutting onions are just plain tears. The tears from pain have stress hormones in them. And you're literally ridding the body of stress hormones. So it is to cry. And there's no point in trying to shush religious explanation, to just tell them how much you love them and care for them. That's all you can do, and that's more validating. Also, don't tell them that you know what they're going through. First, maybe you could say, if God forbid, and I hope it's not the case, some of you have been through something like this, maybe you can. But even then, people who have almost identical tragedies experience them differently. as it says, we're going to be reading in a few weeks, going to read Eicha. And Eicha says, Hayesh machal k'machavi. Is there a pain like my pain? Everybody's pain is unique. And so be very cautious. Maybe you could say one piece of it. Oh, I remember when I went through something like that. And there is a certain connection if people's life experiences overlap. But be very careful of assuming or conveying that you really know what they're going through. I remember, just to give us an example, earlier in my career, I was involved in later was taken over by Spielberg, but the project of getting video testimonies of Holocaust survivors. And I remember sometimes we would do one interview in the morning, and then we'd take a break and do an interview in the afternoon. And sometimes two brothers would come who grew up together in the same house, were together throughout the war, and now live 3 blocks away from each other. And, we do the first interview, and before I got more experience, I would think, well, the afternoon interview will just be a rerun. And yet, even though the circumstances were the same, the experience was so different. So be very careful that, before you say that you know what they're going through. Also, they may reject your overtures. They may reject your attempts, even good attempts, to offer them some nechama, to offer them some comfort. Don't be discouraged. First of all, grieving is a journey. And there are points when sometimes I explain to people is that there are losses that are so enormous, you couldn't do it in a short period of time. You need a lot of time. There's a different pieces and aspects of what's missing in your life. And there might be points in the grieving process where they don't want the connection. They don't want your offers to bring over a treat or to take them out to eat or to take their children with your children on a trip so they have a little bit of a break, whatever it might be. And 2-3 months from now, they might. So just because if you make an overture, it's discouraged, don't just give up. Understand that at different places, but also don't tell them what they need. Don't argue with them, because people who are suffering understand incredible, the blood to the arms and the legs, and you can do this true mentally. When somebody's energy is focused on that, and follow them.